Actually, for the last part that needs to be taught before we move into like a serious project that we could actually turn in is we should go over like how to put either a picture or text. So I'm going to teach you how to do text, but I believe it should be pretty straightforward about how to apply it if you just wanted to slide a picture in its place. So up here is the text tool, and if I click it, and I've already actually chosen a font and size that I like. But let's say you don't have something you like. So I'm going to hit Control A, or you could just click and drag to select everything. So Control A. And over here where there was effects, there's also a character drop-down tab. And you can just click this and scroll through to find something. On my computer, it's a little slow. But you could also just hover over with your mouse and use the scroll wheel, and it should update. But as I said, my computer can sometimes be a little slow. Okay, so let's say this is what you like. Once you type it, you can also go to this alignment tab, and you can align to center, and you can align to vertical. So now it's like nicely centered. And where did it create this? When I had nothing selected, when I had no layer selected and I just clicked, it by default puts it to the top. But if you had this awesome background layer selected and then you type something, it would know to put it right down there. And that's where we want it, because we actually want this. Let me show you what happens if it's on the top. If it's on the top, all the layers below it are going to be seen as if they're behind it. So all these bursts. And what we really want is that word to be covered up with this transition. So it needs to go behind all these bursts. So I'm going to drag it down behind that awesome background. And as you can see, when that new background comes in, or all those bursts on top, it hides it. Now, we need to work on our timing. We kind of spent some time blocking it in, but now that we actually have some text that we want to read, we need to change the timing. So I'm going to click this awesome background to all these shock waves and bursts, hold shift and click to the top. So right now something and awesome background 1 are not being affected. And a word, just like one word, probably only takes a second to read. So we have, I mean, even less, but we'll kind of fly this word in. So I think giving it a second is good. Something, and then now we need something else. So since I like this font, I like pretty much the quality of this layer. I'm just going to duplicate it, and I'm going to move it above awesome background 2. So here's where it can kind of get a little confusing, because we should see the layer, when the layer slides in, it should be covering it, but it doesn't look like it's covering it. So let's double click this new layer and call it awesome. So we can kind of see that, yes, there are two things happening. Like right here, if I go forward, right when this layer becomes active, we can see something awesome. And maybe I should change it to a different color, so just so we can see. So I'm going to go back to character and just drop down that. Let's make it more like charcoal. Okay, so something's happening. Okay, but we don't need that layer to fly in until right about here. So here's what it's looking like so far. Something awesome. But I want this to be centered. Since I retyped that layer, I'm going to double click on this layer to select everything, go to align and recenter it just on horizontally and vertically. So now they're both my texts are centered. Something awesome. And now let's give this text some personality. So for this first one, I want the text to be seen by about right here. So I'm going to hit P to open up position and just set a keyframe right here, because that's where I want it to end. And then I'm going to go backwards and then just drag it off on the X or the Y. If you hold shift and drag, it moves quicker. So now it flies in, pop. It can fly in a little quicker. And I'm just going to grab that last keyframe. You can push F9 to easy ease it. So it slides in, pop, 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 and awesome. This is still looking a little rough. Let's see. And And I think it's just this awesome. Let's try animating it a little differently. Remember what I said, if you pop open certain layers like text or shape layers, you get these different properties. Well, we could animate the position and slide it in, but let's do something a little trickier. We can add this extra position property, which at first glance seems the same. So we created this new layer, it's called animator, and then there's this position. So let's just slide it off. Let's slide it out of frame, and the pops start ending about right there. But we'll keyframe it. We'll have it start swinging in at about this point, but we're not going to keyframe this position. So open the range selector, and now if we drag this start, they'll slide in like that because we pushed off the position. And then we're gonna, basically what's happening, and this isn't my strong suit, but I think what's happening is it's saying that our end position, everything is over here, but we're gonna have every time you drag this percentage, it's moving the start position later, because there's this like text cursor right here. So right now, since it's not finished, the start position is here, but if you animate it, it's just, you can see that the position of this moves. That's all I'm moving. You can tell somebody doesn't understand it very well if they're not teaching it very well, but this is how I learned it, and we're gonna do it this way for now. So we'll move here and then just slide that in, make a new keyframe. So we're just animating the start position, and then now what we have is something slides in, and then awesome comes in piece by piece. I'll have to think about a good way to explain this, and maybe if we didn't have all this other stuff going on, it would be easier to explain. So now I'm gonna set my my work area to right here. I'm just gonna hit N, and let's see the whole thing. Something pop. Awesome. So this seems like a pretty decent motion graphics project. I'm going to just throw in one extra little, it's an optional thing, but right now we don't have like any motion blur going on, and I think that looks pretty good. But sometimes it looks good to add some motion blur here and there. So this first word that flies in, if you go frame by frame, it's just, you can see the word perfectly clear each time. But this, if you're not seeing this layer right here, this is a motion blur category, and if I can turn it on or off. If you're not seeing it, maybe you have to hit this toggles and switches mode. This when you see modes, this is like blending modes, or switches is like switches you want to turn on, like I want motion blur, or I want this to be a 3D layer. Also, the shortcut is F4, so on a Mac it would be Fn plus F4, and that switches between them. So go to your switches and turn on motion blur. That's this, like, it looks like a sphere with like three spheres, or not spheres, but three circles. And as you can see, nothing's happening. And that's because we have to turn on motion blur for the whole composition. We have to say to acknowledge these. So let's turn the switch on right up here. So now we have this cool, something has this motion blur as it comes in. The rest of the stuff doesn't have motion blur because I think that looks pretty nice. And then let's give awesome text some motion blur too. So now I think that just gave it, some higher production value. But if we slow down the speed of the keyframes, it might look better on the awesome. Let's see how it looks. And maybe we'll just start them a bit earlier. So yeah, this is what we're going to do for our project. We're going to have different texts, different transitions, and different elements to give some visual appeal to the next project we're working on. Okay, good job. This was quite a bit to dive in, and look at all these tutorials, but it seems like you guys are doing pretty well.